Hello, folks. It's Barry Lewis Green here, aka Tug, the Unity guy. I don't know why I emphasize Tug, but Tug, the Unity guy with Epic Engage. And this is hashtag humanity, where we get to chat about being human in a world that sometimes challenges our humanity. So that's what we're about. And there's typically three co-hosts and a guest. So I'm going to get on my screen one of our co-hosts below me. Zheng, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey, hello everyone. So nice to see everyone back again. I wish everyone enjoyed the good summers and happy Pride months. I wish whoever you love, whatever you are, you will enjoy this beautiful summer together. And my name is Zheng. I came from China and I recently moved from St. John's to Toronto. So it's a big jump from the ocean and now I'm to the lake. And so would you like to be the next one to introduce yourself?
Sure. Friends, good afternoon. My name is Russell Zahtab and I'm based in Madrid, Spain. I have been given the honor this afternoon to introduce our guest speaker because I know him to some degree. Alain Noghiu is the founder of Spiritual Capital and Moral Leadership Institute. He is also based in Madrid, Spain. And with the permission of everyone here, I would like him to tell us a little bit about what he does and why he does what he does. And perhaps we can, because we're talking about humanity, perhaps we can anchor that into respect, because as we've known and as we see what is happening in the world today, it seems like we're lacking this most foundational virtue. And I would like us to maybe explore that topic a little bit. Alain, take it away.
Wow, that's a big task. Well, thank you. So yes, my name is Alain. I am indeed based in Madrid. Happen to be one room above Russell at the moment.
It fits with the way the Zoom is looking too.
Yeah. So, interesting. So yes. Well, so Spiritual Capital Moral Leadership Institute. I guess we can have a brief introduction about that. It's an institute dedicated to the exploration of those two topics, spiritual capital and moral leadership, both of which are sorely lacking, I would say, and extremely needed in today's world. Moral leadership, I think, is quite intuitive what it means. It's leadership based in moral principles. Spiritual capital is maybe a little bit vaguer, but it's basically the idea of understanding the value that spirituality brings to society. It's a little bit like social capital, which has been researched and qualified. Spiritual capital is the spiritual dimension of that, and trying to understand how spirituality is fundamental to human beings in general and society as a whole. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I know you and I had an individual conversation last month about said topic. I think we're based on what Russell offered up with regards to respect. Here's one of the things that's occurring to me, and I'd love for all of us to kind of weigh in this. If we're talking spiritual capital, is this exploration of the capital of our own spirit? I'm paraphrasing here now. I've had conversations in classrooms over the years about respect, and I'm fully aware that everybody has their own definition of what respect looks like, right? That I've heard of couples who had to struggle with not understanding how they each grew up with respect. In one family, respect was to hold your tongue and not say anything, and and just let it go. And another respect was you say exactly what's on your mind. I've met people from Malta who have no problem doing that culturally, that they just tell you what so I'm aware that we each have our own definitions of respect and what it looks like. And so, Alain, in jumping off from your conversation, if we could look at this spirit of respect and what it looks like for each of us, does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah.
Like, what does respect even look like for each of us? Here's a question. I can jump in first if you want.
Yes. Why don't you, Barry, and then
Okay, so here's where I'm going with this. When I grew up in the 60s, it was commonly understood that, not by my parents, they were a little bit more progressive than this, but it was commonly understood that children should be seen and not heard. In other words, you don't tell an adult what to think. Now, not a bad child, but candor was one of my strengths. And so on a couple of occasions, I said what I felt needed to be said, and I got in trouble for it. Okay. For me, respect looks like, and I've had to figure this out over the years, is that I expect somebody to be honest with me. I expect that, like, if they don't like what I'm saying, I would expect that. I would also expect it to be expressed in a language that is not denigrating to me as a human being, but to my idea. Like, respect to me would be, let's have an open and honest conversation about this. Don't pretend you're all okay with it and then behind my back say how stupid it was. Be upfront with me and let's talk about this. And if we agree to disagree, at least we've had a dialogue. Now, that wasn't what I was brought up with. And I'm not saying my parents were pretty darn good. I love them dearly. But there was a basic mantra that young people don't speak up, right? And growing up in the 60s, I don't mind saying, the kids who did speak up got in serious trouble. 4 students in Ohio got shot by the National Guard for speaking up, right? We're living in a world where, how do we respectfully say what we need to say and be heard? So there was no answer in that, but that's my sense of what respect looks like on the ground.
Yeah. Alain?
So just free flow thinking here. I think all virtues in general, but a virtue like respect is heavily clouded in cultural understanding, like you say. I don't think there is necessarily a single or correct definition of respect, because it is all contextual. That said, I would like to part from the idea that disrespect is a God-given right. I mean, God could have made us drones, and we have free will to the extent that we can disrespect. I'm not advocating for that. Okay. I'm just saying that respect cannot be forced.
Right.
Respect is something that needs to be manifested through understanding, through a certain type of engagement with people. Call it love, call it whatever you wish, but a certain relational quality. It cannot be forced. Mm-hmm. Forced respect is not respect. That's oppression, right? Now, that said, that doesn't mean that all disrespect is justifiable or should be tolerated. Obviously, if you disrespect other human beings' lives, then there should be consequences for that. But it's complicated. I don't think it's very simple. I don't think that we as human beings have an easy time drawing those lines correctly and finding the proper balance between, our God-given freedom to disrespect other fallible beings, so to speak, versus, having sufficient respect to have social cohesion and, a series of decent relationships so that we all can sort of coexist, right? So I don't think that's black and white. I don't think it will probably never be black and white. I think there's always going to be all sorts of issues that are morally complex, and they need to be debated, and they need to be, explored. And I don't think there's an easy way out. At the same time, I would advocate a high level of tolerance when it comes to respect, because, like I said, if whether you believe in God, of course, that's a different matter. But let's just philosophically say, that the universe allows us to disrespect it. Who are we then to sort of impose, certain restrictions on other people, particularly in the realm of private choice and decisions that pertain to ourselves? Now it gets more difficult when it doesn't anymore, right?
Absolutely.
I would say. And what doesn't, that is a question also. But anyway, I think I'm of the mindset that, we need to be very careful in curtailing or forcing respect of others, of rules, of opinions, of ideas. It's a slippery slope. That's just my off-the-cuff thinking.
I got some thoughts, and I'm gonna shelve them for the time and bring back.
Very benign. So I get the sense you are, Alain, you are advocating for respect being a personal choice, right? A personal choice that has consequences because we are not singular beings, right? Because we live in communities and because we are part of the greater ecosystem of this world, then there is a line which, in my opinion, shouldn't be crossed, right? Otherwise, we cannot function. And I understand the whole philosophizing around choice and talking about disrespect. Perhaps, in my opinion, I think what I'm actually looking for is to have a boundary around my own experience based on your definition of what respect and disrespect looks like, right? Because I have a preference that my relationships will not be clouded by disrespect. It is important for me to be able to speak to someone, and that implies, or to be able to consult with someone or find solution to someone. And this implies that there is consideration for each other's culture. This consideration is what I feel respect might be, right? Without it, and just me exercising my absolute free will to say and do whatever I want, even if in my mind it looks like respect, I think should be reevaluated, because the consideration for others is what will allow some kind of solution to be reached, not just my agenda, but your agenda as well. And I find this really tricky. You're right, you have to be very watchful. I find it very tricky as well to always be on my guard, right? So that I don't slip, because the slope is so slippery. The line between respect and disrespect could be just one word, right? And in the expression of that one word, I lose my humanity or you lose your humanity. And this is where, for me, the question always is, where is this line and what are these words,
Absolutely. I'm still shelving what I've got in thought. So, Jen?
Yeah, I really love, like, Russell, your idea about, like, there is a very kind of like tight line in there and it's very to sleep. And I totally agree with you, Alan, that when we talk about respect, we talk about kind of like relationship, not only ourselves with family, friends, but also the relationship we're kind of with the whole earth, with the planet at the back of Barry's like background in there. Yeah, with this like little, yeah, this like little blue like in there. So like all these things just to talk about like house respect. I feel I really like my friends or maybe like a common word that will teach me that put yourself into others' shoe.
Mm.
If you feel that if you thinking like this is kind of really kind of put yourself into others' position and thinking about that. If you put into others' shoes and think about in their consideration and think about how they receive this word. If they're kind of unhappy or if you heard about it, I guess you'll definitely cross that line for sure. And so that is the kind of idea I got, like how to, like in the general daily principles, how I feel that I should kind of be respect to others, how be respectful to others. And also kind of to yours, like I'm working on the climate change consultings. So that's why every day we're talking about like how to be able to protect our environment, how to reduce our own like carbon footprint, and how could ourselves to be like carbon neutralizes, like help our countries, help our companies to be able to achieve like net zero, like aliens with the Paris Agreement. So with these things, I found like this really some like little bit general steps. Maybe we just easily kind of like to ignore or neglect in our daily life, but it do help and it do show the respect to the earth. Like for example, like try to cook from home or not use like this kind of like one times like a plastic like tools, like when you eat your food. Or even like if you go to restaurant, bring your own like container to bring back the food. That's totally like environmental friendly. And also it do help a lot. Back to Barry.
There's a couple of things that's resonating for me big time. I love the notion that it's a choice. You know, that respect and disrespect are both choices. And I can think growing up of situations where, you know, people were seen as disrespectful for speaking up. And the question was, well, are they being disrespectful or are they respecting the right to be able to speak up? I mean, we're seeing it in the public forum now. It's like people are resisting and fighting and challenging laws that supposedly are being either, you know, enforced or drawn away from. So I love this notion that it's a choice. And Zheng, you might appreciate this, but the metaphorical brain in me is going like it's really a dance. It's like a salsa dance, and I can choose to either step on your toes or not step on your toes, or I can, if I'm the lead, I can choose to exert and assert myself because we need to go in that way. And it's kind of working out that framework in terms of the back and forth. So here's where I guess I'm going with it. Given the notion that, you know what, it is a choice, and what some people might see as disrespectful, others might see as respecting something else. I guess, and I hope this doesn't sound rhetorical when I ask this, but what are the benefits of, I guess where I'm going with this is that what are the benefits of asserting our voice, saying what needs to be said, speaking truth to power, if you will, but with respect? That what's the value of holding a chosen sense of respect when we need to say what we need to say? I don't know if that diatribe made any sense. It did to me, but that doesn't mean anything.
Well, so one thought about speaking truth to power, and I'm all about that, by the way. But there is a misconception in that notion. Actually, maybe two. First of all, speaking truth is difficult. I mean, unless you're the mouthpiece of truth, which I don't think many of us can claim to be. You're not speaking any truth, you're speaking your truth. So there's a major difference between speaking truth and speaking your truth. And I think the same can be said about power. There's many forms of power. So bottom line is, I think it is important to speak one's truth, because it is a representation of your understanding of reality, right? And since reality is quite complex and we all tend to see it in different ways, it benefits everyone if multiple lenses are used in order to understand it. So conceptually, I mean, philosophically, I think it's important to speak your truth, whether that's to power or not to power. That said, clearly, we as human beings are limited in our ability to process other people's truth, right? So that calls for, I guess, a level of sensitivity. But I think it depends on the scenario. I think it calls for sensitivity when, I think motive is an important thing, but I think it calls for sensitivity in some scenarios, and it calls for less sensitivity in other scenarios. It calls for sensitivity when you're trying to build a relationship, or you're trying to, together go into a certain direction, etc. In other scenarios, it might call for assertiveness when you're dealing with a scenario where your truth is being curtailed or limited or dismissed. I could imagine scenarios where, and by the way, that's what I meant by disrespect. I didn't mean it as a negative. I didn't mean to present it as a negative something. Not the opposite of respect, but rather the freedom to not respect, which is different, right?
Right.
So it's effectively the liberty that you have as an individual to engage with reality and truth on your own terms. Liberty of conscience that nobody can take away from you. I think it's a fundamental reality that we have as human beings, and whether that's through philosophical understanding of the world, but certainly through religious understandings of the world. Like I said, if you're given freedom to deny reality at whatever level, that's quite the level of freedom.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean that reality is not going to assert itself. You know what I mean? Right. It might, but this ability to deny it is I think it's quite an interesting concept. It is only humans have that ability. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was reading, and I'm going to get the pronunciation name absolutely wrong because I was corrected on it last week and I'm still getting it wrong. But I was reading some quotes from Johann Wolfgang Goethe, probably messed up. And one of them was, one of the hardest things essentially to see is what's standing right in front of you. This notion that sometimes it's staring you, and yet we have as human beings that capacity to not see it. Russell or Zheng, because you've just triggered another thought that I'm going to shelve.
Yeah, I I want to just expand it a little bit of the topic we just talk about it, because at the beginning we talk about like what is the respect between the parents. Like, so that's the piece I don't know if anyone see recently we have like two Asian movies kind of like provided by the Hollywood, by the Disney's, to kind of focus on the like mother and the daughter's relationship in like Eastern Asian families. So highly recommend if anyone interested to want to watch it. So one is the Turning Right by the Disney. There is like first female like Asian directors to talk about like in Toronto, the story happens in Toronto, like a girl, like a teenager girl, like she suddenly got the magic to be able to turn a big giant red panda. And this family talks about it's a curse, but actually she has a different opinion on that. The other one was like everything, everywhere, all at once. It's by my favorite like Asian like actress, Michelle Yeoh. And it's also talk about the stories like how when the mother found she had the biggest crisis when her husband got divorced and her daughter was like a lesbian. And then her daughter wanted to just explore all these things in front of her dad. How would she do? And it's also about like multiple universe, like time jumping, all these like cool ideas into it. But it's all focused on that, like back to my culture, like East Asia culture, we thinking that we should be totally respect our parents. Because it's our parents give us the life, it's our parents raise us up. So that's why like we have to be like respect for that. We should be very humble, appreciate everything we received and be totally respect. And now it's become to the conflicts. When we grow up, we will have our own idea. It will kind of become like the small things like, do I like do I want to, it's become small things, which kind of clothes I want to wear. Maybe I want to wear some like really cool, really gothic one, but of course our parents won't like it. Or add to like when we're growing up, like which job we want to do, which university we want to have, which major, and even who is the loved we want to like get married with. So all these things, it's kind of become like a little bit conflict, disagreement, and it will be very easy to be accused that you are not like respect. You're like quite respectful. So I feel that's like one like call back to Russell's that line. It's a really tight line in there to talk about like now it's become like under the respect and umbrella of it. It's a really tight line there. It's like how to be yourself and how you could also make your parents happy and make it like respect.
Oh, wow. You just triggered a thought, but I'm shelving it. Russell?
I will give a simple example of a human dynamic, okay? Because I find that when I'm trying to define a word, maybe a real life example may be easier for you to see my point of view, no? So where I come from, respect looks like inclusivity.
Okay.
To show my respect for someone, I throw a question out into the air and I say, let's do this, for example. And I don't individualize everyone and say, do you want to come? Do you want to come? Do you want to come? Right? It is a general statement and everyone is welcome, right? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we had this discussion, Alain and I, yesterday about dynamics within cultures, right? So from my point of view, that is what respect looks like. Alain is not isolated or individualized. He becomes part of the group and he's welcome everywhere I go or everywhere everyone goes. The definition, however, so there are two sides of what respect looks like. That's my point of view. From his point of view, my understanding is that respect implies that I have to ask him as an individual, would you like to come? Right? In the beginning of our relationship, I didn't know that this is what respect meant to him, right? So to be able to step out of my own definition of what respect should look like for everyone and be considerate of his definition as well was a long path for me, right? And when I say it's a long path, it's an ongoing path because the examples, they shift and change and become more complex as we age together, right? So this is one of those things. it is not, I think we would like to encapsulate respect into something we can, like just in one word, this is what it means and this is what it looks like. But I don't think it's possible. I think it requires a consideration, not just of cultural differences, but gender differences and racial differences and all kinds of things which separate us or identify us as people, right? So in this sense, this is an example, and I don't know if Alain wants to like share his little cup of tea about this, but the more different we are as individuals, like we don't come from the same cultures, or we're not both females, or the more different we are, and I think there are that many differences in the world that we cannot even put them all into one basket, the labels that we have, right? The more differences there are, the more we have to be really open in the definition we have of what respect can look like, right? In consideration of all the different human beings out there. Yeah.
Alan, did you want to respond? Because I'm still shelving something, but.
No, I think it all makes sense. I agree that there's many different definitions of respect. Obviously, there's cultural interpretations, etc. I think fundamentally for me, it's like I said, to me, it's about the minimum respect required for peaceful coexistence. That's what's needed, right? Beyond that, I would say it becomes a practice in dignity, right? So let me put it this way. Going back to the example of respecting life, obviously, it should be obvious that disrespecting somebody else's life is not acceptable,
right?
Because it's existential, right? So obviously that should not be within the realm of my liberties, all right? But beyond that, it becomes much blurrier, right? Can I offend somebody? Can I really hurt somebody by saying something hurtful, or even if it's let's say I do it on purpose, right? So I'm actually aware of where the respect is, but I purposefully choose to ignore it. I'm sure, but it's blurry, because the other person could choose to take it in or choose not to take it in, right? So the way I see it is that there's a certain hierarchy in terms of absolutely necessary requirements in terms of coexistence and desirable ones for better coexistence, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really what makes this interesting and difficult, and where all the variabilities come in, and where personally I not on the sentiment and an emotional level, but on a philosophical level, I would advocate for less rather than more, right? Because what you need is people engaging freely with all sorts of virtues, and not through some sort of coercive system, whether that's political or cultural, right? Do I agree, Zhem? Do I agree that we need to respect our parents? Absolutely. But there is many layers to that, culturally speaking, right? Genuine respect is a feeling. It's not a cultural straitjacket, right? Genuine respect is an emotion, is how you feel about somebody, and you consciously choose to respect that, or to act in a particular way based on that feeling, not because somebody's going to look at you weird, or they're going to get upset, or it's not acceptable in that context, etc. Now, I'm not saying that those mechanisms are not important, because they're all layers, right, that stimulate people to behave in certain way. But ultimately, the higher level of consciousness calls for, less coercion and more freedom of choice, right?
Absolutely.
To submit yourself to it. It's a little bit like gravity. We need it in order to keep our feet on the ground. But too much of it, and you're stuck to the earth.
Absolutely.
Too little of it, you float around, and you need lead in your shoes, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think there is it's ultimately about balance, right? It's ultimately about context, and that shifts, right? So what may be valid right now may not be valid in 100 years from now, and there is no absolute necessarily in that sense. I mean, even if you look at it in and this is where people get all hung up, right? Even if you look at it in religious terms, right? Even there you see moral shifts,
Right.
even within a religion.
Yep.
I think very few people would advocate for a 12th century understanding of Christianity, or would want to go back to that. Although there is some people that do that, but not the majority.
Right.
Right. So most people understand that even divine law, so to speak, has a certain level of malleability, flexibility, adaptability to certain circumstances. That doesn't make it less right or wrong. It just makes it different.
Yeah.
Again, you can see the same thing in the natural realm. When you're higher up, there's less oxygen. Is that right or is that wrong? No, it just is.
Right.
If you want to survive there, you need to adapt to that reality. So I think in a moral sense, it's similar. Now, yes, there is boundaries. You go beyond a certain boundary, there's going to be consequences that you don't like, or that are really difficult to deal with. Right?
Every synapse in my brain is just firing off. I'm conscious of your folks' time. I want to be respectful of that. But I would feel that I wouldn't be respecting. I'm trying to be a punster here. I feel like I wouldn't be respecting this time if I didn't move it to this space. And you've helped me get to this space, to be honest with you, because Zheng, when you were talking about the movies, and I'm going to check out those movies, but throughout this conversation, last 10 minutes or so, I've been reminded of the dance I had with my parents. Again, I love them, but we saw the world in some ways differently, right? In some ways, very much the same. But the points where we were different, it was a dance in learning how to Barry to be Barry, not just the son of Mac and Marion. What did that dance look like? So, for example, when I was 26, I left a really good federal government job. My parents grew up in the Depression. They thought getting a secure job was gold and you should keep it. And there I was 3 years in saying, I'm going to move to Vancouver. And I remember going to the airport, and Mom didn't take me because she would have just cried. Dad took me, and I looked at Dad and I said, what if it doesn't work out? And he said, you can always come back. I thought, okay. But it was over the progression of the 44 years I had my dad, and the 50 odd years I had my mom, there was this dance, taking my little dog Panda to the seniors home where Mom was. And all of the seniors loved Panda coming in, and everybody was joyous. And Mom drew me aside and said, you shouldn't be bringing a dog in here. Right? And having that conversation. So where I'm going with this is that it does occur to me that having conversations like this matter, that we don't all have the same sense of what respect looks like. And it is an evolving dance, and it does change over time. And Alain, you said it very well earlier. It starts with respecting ourselves, having a sense of our voice matters. But then as we extend it into the world, understanding that other people's views matter. I mean, we're looking at it right now, and I don't want to politicize the conversation, but, you know, at the time of this recording, we've seen a judgment made in the US that basically could mean that certain viewpoints are going to be imposed on other viewpoints. And we're going to see all kinds of things coming out of that. But what occurs to me is that we've got to have these conversations about what respect looks like. And I guess my thought in kind of bringing some kind of bow to this is, and I think both Russell and you, Alain, have kind of addressed this to some extent, but what does it take for us to have those conversations with the people in our lives? What does it take for us to redefine our relationships with our parents, to continuously work on this respect in our relationships with our friends, our loved ones, because it's not a magic bullet. We don't have a pill that you can take. Well, now you respect me. Like, what does it take for us to have this type of conversation going forward with our parents, with our friends, with everybody that's important to us, and strangers? That's a big question. Russell.
Barry, you know how at the very beginning of this little chat that we are sharing, you mentioned what respect looks like when you were growing up and how a child is seen and not heard, right? So I also kind of grew up in that kind of environment.
Mm-hmm.
But that was 40 years ago, which means to say that the family dynamic I am in has matured.
Right.
Back then it was childlike, now, and then when I was in university, it was like an adolescent, and now we are slightly all adults, right? So the dynamic of the kind of respect we show each other has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens only with time. So one, respect evolves also in a family unit. And care necessary to be given so that this respect can evolve requires perhaps other virtues like love and consideration and perseverance. So respect is not isolated from the other human qualities which make us good people.
Right.
It works with everything else, I believe, right? So as respect evolves, the way, for example, I practice it and the way I expect others to practice it with me in the moment I am in is defined in my mind. But when I travel, the practice changes. For example, right? For example, in Spain, respect looks like when you address someone, you address with a title, and then the way you speak it sounds controlled. And then when you go somewhere else, respect would look like you bending and touching someone's foot and then making a motion through your whole body to show that you respect. Or in Thailand, it could be you bend and the hierarchy of the person, like where they are in society, shows the level of where your hands are. That is what respect would look like to them. And I have to adjust. I cannot just be like, hey, what's up? And then just give them a high five, because where I'm from, this is what equality and respect looks like, right? So I adjust my practice of how I show respect as I move through the world. And when I'm wherever I'm at, respect sounds in a very specific way. So I have an individual practice and I have a practice which involves others, right? But it also evolves because the way I express it becomes more and more refined as I mature. You know, so when I was a child, maybe I'll be like, express myself so freely without consideration for somebody else. But as I matured, there's a way of verbalizing that in consideration of someone else. So I think it's constantly shifting, and this is what's beautiful about respect. What we know now is not the kind of respect we can actually imagine all of us practicing in 20 years, 30 years down the line. Because the way our parents were, the way they were practicing respect, I am certain is illegal nowadays. Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, you know. For example, I mean, yes, go ahead.
No, I need to interject just to be clear. For me, I think what I was trying to articulate is that my dad may not have respected my decision at a certain point, but respected it later. Right? That it's the evolving, like it ended up being a really great decision. You know, served me well. So I think it is important to understand that respect evolves out of what was initially not respect. Like I was not seen as smart when I was making that decision, right? To move and leave that. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, but I want to be clear. I think we're in agreement on that. It evolves over time. And, you know, I think my dad and my mom, their respect of me evolved too. And my respect for them evolved. Absolutely. Alain or
Zheng? Sorry.
Yep.
One last thing. And I think this is what's really beautiful about this kind of human quality. It's not stagnant. It will never become stale. And as we become more global in our approach, right, it will just become more and more colorful and vibrant, and all kinds of expressions which we are not even thinking about now. They will be introduced at some point, right? I think that's what I'm really looking forward to about this whole concept of respect.
Here. Alain or Zheng?
Yeah, I can analyze because I really love the rest of the concept idea shared about like how to adopt it and how the time changes, the dynamic will bring, and also depends on where you are and the way to show respect are different. Just collect a little bit story. So I come from China, and when I hang with my other friends, they're from different countries, like coming from like Bangladesh, India, I said, okay, let's like they said to me, let's go have Chinese food because it's your cuisine, it's your culture. And I told them that let's have Bangladesh or Indian food because that's your cuisine, that's your culture. So it's kind of like really this kind of like interesting stories about how to pick up restaurant from the small things that we are like we tried our best to respect each other, and sometimes it's kind of our choice will be totally different. Yeah. So like totally different, but the good thing is that we will still kind of do one thing together. We will say, okay, thank you so much for respect myself. This time I want to try your cuisine, so let's do for it.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Zheng?
Yeah.
Particularly from a Chinese perspective, because you were mentioning about the respect for parents and so forth. How do you see that evolving now? Because, you know, I mean, generationally, I've had students who have literally come to me and said that their family chose their program that they were going to take because to honor the family and so forth. How is that impacting for your generation coming, you know, from that background? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, wow. That was a huge story about like which major, which career to pick. And I remember it's still like in talk show, all the way people talk about for Asian family, you could only be three things: doctor, lawyer, engineer. Beyond of that, like kind of like how to say, like beyond of that, you are like you are like dishonor for the families. You will be kicked off of the like a family dinner list, something like that. You are like the rebellious kid, except if you could become a doctor, lawyer, engineer. I won't say that was like kind of 100% true, but at some certain point, it's very common.
Wow.
Yeah, and I guess it's kind of the license we kind of learn, kind of the lesson to learn like all our life. Because of course, why the parents actually pick up these three majors or are actually to pick some like really comfortable, because they do help you like live easier in the future. But at the same time, does pick up these things make you feel live easier, like make you happy in the future? That is very, very hard to say. And I would say like at least in my case, is my parents helped me to pick up my major when I go to university. And I never regret to become an engineer. Otherwise, I won't wear this ring.
Yes.
Also, at the same time, I kind of also give up my dream to kind of become like a novelist or become like a manga, like a magazines for it. So it's really kind of like a trade-off for it.
And there's still time for that.
Yeah, that's still time, and that's the case.
Yeah.
There's still time for it. It's never too late.
Absolutely. Alan?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an interesting conversation because it highlights how we all struggle on the one hand to understand these concepts, but on the other hand also have different definitions of it. You know, the one thought that just jumps to my mind is that, you know, there is a difference between you individually discovering or understanding what respect means, and or any other virtue for that matter, and being told what it means. And we have to keep those two things apart, right?
Yep.
Because the thing about human society, which I think is quite interesting, is that it's always an interplay between, you know, the collective and the individual, right? And there's always a tension between those two realities, and you know, that's what makes it fascinating. But you know, it's not always the balance is not always there, right? So people can call oppression respect.
Right.
People can call disrespect respect. People can call, you know, disloyalty respect. People can call loyalty respect. I mean, so bottom line is, back to the beginning, I don't think there is a single definition. I think it's contextual. I think it's individual. I think it's complicated, and it's something that is dynamic and continuously needs to be evaluated. Yet it is real in the sense that although it's flexible, it's like a rubber band. You know, it is flexible. It contracts and expands, but it's not unlimited.
Right.
You know, pull it too far, and it will snap. Right.
Mhm.
So these things, and I think that's sort of the dynamic we're playing with always. You know, and sometimes we snap it, and sometimes we don't stretch it far enough. And you know, that's both on the individual and on the collective level. And I agree with Russell. I think it's always going to be like that. It's never going to be stale. But it does have consequence, right? And ultimately, I think, you know, both on the individual and on the collective level, that's what life is about. You know, you're continuously balancing, you know, your own understanding of these things against your context, your social reality, and vice versa. And sometimes you as an individual are going to overstep boundaries, and sometimes, you know, the collective is going to overstep boundaries. Both things happen, right? And you know, in that sense, there is no absolutes, and there's no absolute correct, no absolute justice, no absolute nothing. We live in a contingent reality, not an absolute reality. So in that sense, you know, whatever we're facing now, we might overcome in 10 years, but something else will happen. You know, some other challenge will come to test our understanding and application of respect.
With all that in mind, normally we close each of these conversations with a quick go around. I'd like to do that. A simple thought, simple is not the word, you know, a thought, maybe it's a reiteration of something we've already said, or something that didn't come out in the conversation that, you know, you feel needs to be said. I got a quick thought that's occurring to me, but I don't feel the need to be first. That being said, if you need a few seconds to ponder what that thought is, I certainly can go first. Russell.
I'll go first, Barry.
Okay.
I'm going to bring it back to what Alain said slightly earlier, where he said, respect is a feeling. And when I try to define very clearly what it looks like, it moves away, and I use all of my brain power. Whatever is left, right? I use all of it. I can justify an action and make it gray, right? So, and then I can carry myself and not look so respectful, because that will serve maybe my interest.
Right.
So in those moments when I feel that I'm using too much of my intellect in trying to define what respect looks like, I have learned to suspend the intellectual part and really use the heart element to help me choose the respectful feeling or action. And when I use my heart element, my choices are slightly more considerate of others. So in that sense, I suspend the intellect and I use my heart when I'm choosing acts which hopefully are respectful to others. That has helped me. And yeah, this is a very, I find a very interesting topic, which we will never be able to dissect fully in one sitting. And it's maybe one of those things, Barry, we can approach a few more times and tie it into other practices we have as human beings, because this is #humanity. And then respect is always a part of it, of the human element, you know.
Absolutely. Alain or Zheng, or I can jump in.
Yeah, not surprisingly, for me, it works the other way around. I don't trust my emotion when it comes to respect. Because if I go with my emotion, I'll be quite disrespectful very often. So I actually need to filter it through philosophy in order to decide whether I've been respectful or not, because my gut emotion is very often perceived as disrespectful, although it's not necessarily intended like that. But I've come to learn that you know, the way I impulsively react to certain things is genuine, but is perceived as disrespectful because I don't filter. Right. So, you know, if I want to be perceived as respectful, I need to actually, you know, make a conscious effort, and it's not an emotional one. It's a cognitive one for me. Right. So it's very different to Russell, because I actually don't arrive at the conclusion that my motives are tainted. I need to put boundaries around myself in order to do the right thing, because if I just let it go impulsively, then 9 out of 10 times it is actually tainted, and it is actually, I come to the conclusion later on that was disrespectful. You know, even though at that point in time it doesn't matter to me, right? So I work in the opposite direction in that sense.
But Barry,
yes,
and Zheng, you know, just a little clarity, because for the friends who are just catching us right now, Alain and I are part of a family unit. So
yep.
His definition, or the way he approaches respect, is completely different from mine. And you can imagine then how much we have to talk about respect to understand what it means to both of us. The interesting thing, however, is, and this is just my own opinion of it, is when we see respect, we both see it, right? Although I see it with my heart element, he sees it with his intellect. We both know what it looks like, right? And we know when someone is showing respect, even if it's, you know, culturally it's a little off for either one of us, we know that they're showing respect. So even if the approach is different, because I think we're constantly talking about it, we are getting some clarity about what it looks like.
Absolutely.
And Yeah, this is
And
what's
we're dangerous because we can also see through it. So when we're together, we're quite dangerous because it's, you know, both filters work, you know.
Absolutely.
true.
I'm loving this. Zheng?
Yeah, I really love the whole conversation, and I do learn a lot about. And just to quickly like wrap up all the things, I feel like it's like all we talk about like respect, and the way to present respect. It really depends on the time. Time is the magicians. Depends on what the dynamic you have, and where you are, and what is the people or objective we are treating with.
Yeah.
Are treating with a human being, we are treating with Earth. That things is all different. And I would say like that. And also like when we talk about our relationship with parents, it's sometimes lots of things actually be put into the big box of respect.
Yeah.
And it's become a very easy things, like kind of if you want to kind of trigger out something was kind of irrespective. But then that's the part like we're talking about it. Respect was like a balanced thing where it's like a lines in there. Sometimes you have to pick up like well not pick up, but sometimes you just have to like make yourself also feel better about it, like
Mhm.
respect others, but also at the same time kind of be yourself. I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm not talking about something like you should not, like you should always be yourself. No, that's not a way to kind of always do for it. But at least if you feel there's some like important moments of your life, then also respect yourself.
As I collect my thoughts, here's what's occurring to me. This has been a hugely valuable conversation for me, though it's not all about me, but I'm walking away with some real value. It's not lost to me, and I think, Alan, you mentioned about boundaries and so forth. We don't truly discover our boundaries until they're crossed. That's when we figure out where our boundaries are, when they're crossed. So absolutely, it's the only way we figure it out. It also occurs to me that this is a valuable conversation for anybody who wants to have a successful long-term friendship, relationship, business partnership, that the things we've been talking about, figuring out how we see this thing called respect and knowing that it's not a final destination, I think is really important. And the third point that's occurring to me, and we didn't really get into this specifically, but you know, I grew up with this notion of live and let live. I think, and maybe this is a future conversation, there are certain things where we can disagree and everything's cool, right? There are certain things where we need to be somehow on a closer same page or things aren't cool. And I think the world is figuring out how to figure out what those things, if we're talking about the environment, we're all living the same environment. Now we got to figure out what that's going to look like going forward. We've got to figure that out because if it's not infecting Newfoundland and Labrador, it will. So there is this notion that live and let live is important if there are things that don't impact each other. And so self-respect, I'm walking away with a sense of, yep, I think it's important for me to respect my own sense of truth. It's also important to understand that my way isn't the highway. And I've got to figure out how I talk to people who may see the world slightly or bigly different to figure out what that's going to look like, because certain things we better work together on or we just don't work. So that's the stuff I'm walking away with. I think particularly I'm walking away with this notion of how important this conversation could have been for me 20 years ago before I entered into several significant relationships that, to varying degrees did not follow some of the wisdom here. So I've enjoyed it. I hope you have. Alan, it was a pleasure to have you on and have a second conversation. I'm still working on how I'm saying bye now. I was doing the peace thing. I still am, but I don't know, peace or something, but peace. So you can figure out how you want to bid adieu. But I'm going to do that just as a warning. So that's what we do on hashtag community for people who are watching. We just have conversations. We don't have any answers, but dang, we got some questions. I'm with peace. Look, peace right between the planet, right there.
Peace
Love
out.
Bye, folks.
Take care, everyone.